Hello, everybody, and welcome to Campfire Conversations on Shred Space. This is Grant Alexander. This is episode 3 of Campfire Conversations, where I sat down and spoke with Dave Watson. This conversation took place on Clubhouse. I do want Clubhouse to know that we had permission from everybody involved to record this conversation. I would like to start out with a little bit of an apology. We had some technical difficulties in recording. So you actually will not hear my voice for about the first 40 minutes of this conversation. After that, it does get cleaned up and you'll be able to hear everything that everybody else said. What's most important though is Dave's message definitely got across. Dave talked about fatherhood, divorce, life and death in the mountains, the death of friends, his time on K2, his time on Everest. He also talked about a near-death experience. This was a really deep and meaningful conversation, and I just really want to say thanks to Dave for sitting down with me. Finally, we did discuss the possibility of running a ski mountaineering trip to Bhutan. If there's anyone out there that is actually interested in joining us, and you don't necessarily need to be a pro mountaineer or a pro backcountry skier, maybe you're someone with just a lot of experience or some experience who has, a good level of fitness. If that's something that might be interesting to you, do me a favor, send me a message on Instagram at grantalexandergary. That's grantalexandergary on Instagram. Thank you all for tuning in. Without any further ado, here is the man himself, Dave Watson.
Because that's just where life is most juicy, and that's where the most growth happens. So whatever you want to talk about, just let her rip. Yeah, certainly. I'm game. Life is changing quite drastically for me. I've been a stay-at-home dad for the past 8 years, and now I'm going through a divorce, and the kids are not a part of my everyday life, which is something I struggle with often and carry not a small amount of guilt and shame from. So it's just I'm getting back into work. I'm getting back into the mountains, recreating a life that feels like it's my true calling. And there are just a lot of things swirling around that. So that's where things are. Oh, certainly. It's I think for a lot of folks, it is like the more you can be out in nature and the more you can be out in really raw, wild nature, then it hits you in a different way. And my time in the mountains, especially really high mountains, is something that is very special to me and hits me on a different frequency than anything else. And I really like it there, and I feel like I belong. It feels just really good and right. And I have taken a long time away from the big mountains, and I've been struggling, and I feel like now it's time to head back and see how it goes. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm rearranging my life to try to make space for that. And I feel like it's about to happen, but there's a fair amount of uncertainty with the pandemic and just with life in general. So we'll see how it goes. Right. And I think we all do. I think Matthias struggles with it as well. Like, where do you find, how do you know that it is actually your true calling and something that really spoke to you in the past and experiences you've had in the past that you felt like that was the real deal and that's what you wanted to do with your life? You take time away from it. You need to revisit it, because I'm getting back into the big mountain thing. I don't know for certain that is what is going to speak to me in the same way. We all change and life changes, and a lot of times what we do is just opening the doors and the opportunity for the next thing, and that next thing might actually be what really feels most satisfying and provides the most continuities. And even if they don't seem appealing to you, just recognizing the value in it as a growth experience and just go and check it out. And it might actually lead to something very significant for you. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's just so special to be over there, and especially, doing the types of climbing and skiing that you want to do, to be able to look at mountains and just be inspired on a level where it's like, wow, that looks super rad. It's really beautiful. And I want to try to climb up that. And it doesn't really matter if it's been done before, because if it looks good to you and you haven't done it, that's it right there. That's all that matters. So it's not about trying to be the first or chasing records or anything like that. It's just going out and having fun. I mean, all of this is just having fun, and some of us can make some money at it, hopefully, and keep doing it, but we'll see. But that's really the root of it all, is just to try to have fun. Yeah, I grew up in central Connecticut, and the town I grew up in had a really bitchin' rock climbing area and a tiny little ski area. And I started skiing at 9 years old at Mount Southington, just kind of skidding around on ice and building jumps and hitting jumps and skiing around in jeans and freezing my ass off with my buddies. And my folks, our grandparents, lived in Vermont, so we would go up to Vermont quite a bit through childhood, and eventually started skiing up there. And I just really liked it. It felt fun to speed down the mountains, and the just being out in the winter, the cold mountains, it felt really nice. And then I got into rock climbing and ice climbing, and those also were just really fun activities, and I just kept doing it, and that's all I wanted to do. And there were many years in a row where I climbed like 300 days a year, either outdoors or in the gym. And I started ski patrolling in the late 90s at Mount Snow in southern Vermont, like back when the X Games were there. And then ski patrolled at Smuggler's Notch in Vermont. And in Vermont, the years that I was at Smuggler's Notch, that's when I started going to Everest. And that's kind of a whole nother conversation. But the ski patrolling thing has been really fun. It's the world's greatest low-paying job. But to ski around with your buddies and throw bombs and ski pow and save people is just really rewarding and intense work. It's super fun. And I'm still ski patrolling now. I've been doing it about 20 years, and for the past 11 winters, I've been working on Mount Hood. And now I own an avalanche school where I'm teaching airy avalanche courses every weekend, and have gotten back into the mountain guiding thing, working for Alpine Ascents International based out of Seattle. And this spring I'll be guiding on Everest for Lucas Furtenbach out of Austria. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. That's going to be amazing. Yeah, it was a fun place. I actually had made a lot of really great friends there, and had a lot of really fun experiences. I skied a couple runs with Dee Snyder from Twisted Sister Flying. He was unmistakable. I mean, he's extremely tall. And if like I grew up watching MTV in the 80s. So Twisted Sister videos were all over MTV, and I knew what Dee looked like with makeup and without. So, yeah. Yeah, I had zero interest or ambition to climb Everest. It was just out of my league, and it was just something that I didn't really like. Mountaineering to me seemed kind of boring, because I was into hard rock climbing, technical ice, and so mountaineering was just like walking, and it just didn't appeal to me. But a friend of mine, who was one of my rock climbing mentors, he invited me to go to this slideshow in Connecticut. And the slideshow was of this couple who was living in Connecticut, who the guy, George, at the time had summited Everest 5 times, and his wife had done it 3 times, I believe. The female world record holder. So I was like, oh, cool, this will be a cool slideshow, and I'll see my buddy Chuck. So I went down there I was working in Vermont at the time, went down to Connecticut to see the show, and was pretty blown away. It looked just the stories about the culture, the scene, the climbing, the mountain, everything was like, wow, that looks pretty rad. I still don't want to do it. Like, it still, wasn't on my radar. But then afterwards, after the show, Chuck introduced me to George, and George looks at me and he goes, "This is the guy?" And Chuck says, "Yeah, this is the guy." And he's looking right at me, but he's talking to Chuck like I'm not there. He's like, "This guy's really skinny." And Chuck's like, "Yeah, because he's a rock climber." And he's like, "All right." And so basically they're like, "Do you want to come to Everest with us?" And I was like, "What?" It was not like I was completely blown away, taken off guard, and just started talking to them. They're like, "Yeah, we got this Connecticut. We're building this Connecticut Everest expedition, this team of Connecticut climbers, and Chuck thought you would be a good addition to the team." And it's like, oh, that's cool. However, like, I've never been above like 12,000 feet before, and I have zero interest in going there. And you guys are leaving in 2 months, and I'm working a job making $9 an hour and have zero savings. It's like, I'm flattered to be asked, but it ain't happening. And so that's sort of where it ended. And then after a couple, I went back up to Smugs and working there, freezing my ass off. And I was like, well, shit, I don't think I can pull it off. But if I try to raise the money, if I try to make it happen, and if it doesn't, then at least I know I tried. But if I don't try to get on that plane, don't try to join these guys on the hill, then I may regret it. So, 2 months later, I was on a plane to Nepal, and that trip we ended up summiting in a blizzard. It was pretty gnarly. 6 people died that day on the route we were climbing, and we were up and down before anybody. We were already down before we even heard that people were in trouble. We summited at 6 a.m, and I was down in advanced base camp by lunchtime. So it went really well, and I was stoked, and I wanted more of it. And so that's where everything started for me. That's how I got into the big mountain thing. And it changed my life. No, that was 20 years later. But an interesting story, when I was rock climbing in Connecticut, one day I was out there. Like I said, I used to climb like 300 days a year. So a lot of times I'd be going out there alone, leaning against a tree, watching me. And I was like, all right, whatever. And so when I came back down, I was like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" And we just started talking. And I was a teenager at this time, and he was a grown dude. And so we started rapping, and he's like, "Yeah, I used to climb here back in the day. I used to take some classes at Yale, and I'm just cruising around." And I was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, actually, I'm on this speaking tour. I wrote a book, and just cruising around talking about it and stuff." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. What kind of book do you write?" He's like, "Oh, it's about Mount Everest. It's called Into Thin Air." And so it was John Krakauer just sitting there at the crag watching this teenager climb around. And it was one of like, we shook hands. I was like, wow, I shook the hand of a guy that climbed Mount Everest. So cool. And so yeah, that's my John Krakauer story. But yeah, this particular incident with me climbing happened way after. into thin air.
Yeah, obviously it's a story I've heard over the years, and I love hearing your Everest stories, Dave. It always gets me frothy. But I what this is straight to the point, man. But what made the difference between you guys climbing so, I don't want to say easily, but so smoothly, and six people dying in one day?
I don't really, well, first of all, hey Matthias, I love you, man.
I
But
love you too.
I it's things everybody experience, everybody has their own experience going through the same thing. Everybody processes it differently, everybody's prepared differently, everybody's like riding a different vibe when they step into the experience. So it's really hard to say why it felt casual to us while other people are like literally dropping dead. I don't know, because I don't know their mindset and their preparation and their life experience heading into it. But it's one of those things where um, the people on our team who had summited before, they had that experience of knowing the route and knowing the weather and just being through a really intense experience in the death zone like that. Because the first time I saw a couple dead bodies, and these were guys that had just died like the night before, I was completely freaked out. And um, I just stopped in my tracks. And they're like, one of the dudes was still clipped into the rope. So I either had to step over this guy and unclip, or just unclip well before and kind of walk around, take the long route around. But I mean, it's pretty steep, rocky, like slippery, icy terrain. So unclipping from the ropes in these spots is not advisable. So I saw this dude and this dead guy. He's got his gloves off. I just see his frozen hands, frozen face. There's like snow pooled up in his eye sockets and everything. It's just like super grim. And I turn around and I look at this woman behind me, Lakba, who's already summited 9 times. She holds the record still. And I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with her when we get back on the hill this spring. But I look at her and I was like, yeah, is this all right? And she's like, is what all right? I was like this dead guy right in front of us. Is this okay? And the weather was bad. It was blowing, it was snowing, complete whiteout. And she looks at the dead guy and she looks at me and she's like, well, how do you feel? I was like, well, I feel okay. I feel fine, actually. I'm feeling really good. But the fact that there's like, I got to step over a dead person, to me is a huge red flag. And she just looks at me and she's like, well, if you're okay, then we're okay. She's like, you just worry about yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. You do what you need to do. And I was like, all right, that makes sense. Really, it is my experience. It is, I need to tune into myself and be true to myself. So if I'm feeling shitty or weak or scared, then I need to analyze that and possibly turn around. But if I'm feeling good, and the expeditions I learned the most on were the ones where I didn't summit. The trips that I took to K2, I never summited K2, and I went there twice, spent 2 summers there, and I learned so much, and I had a wonderful time. And it was just one of those things where it didn't work out, but a lot of times how we define success in mountaineering is the safe return home. It's not about the summit. The summit is the furthest possible point you're going to turn around, but you're going to turn around somewhere. And the way how open you are to the experience and how you process the experience, that is really what matters. And life is full of these profound moments, but even more so when you take yourself out of your comfort zone and scare the shit out of yourself and make yourself uncomfortable, um, and just face adventure with an open heart. Like that's really juicy nuggets of wisdom come into your life. I was 28, and then I went back at 30 to try to do a new route, a much harder route, because I was like, oh, that was rad, but I'd like to do something harder. And so went back when I was 30 to try to climb this East Ridge, but it was in really poor shape, super dangerous, all this kind of stuff. And it just made me think like, wow, climbing hard routes on the really big mountains on 8,000-meter peaks is so much about hitting the conditions correctly that it's really low probability to nail it, and that you might have to go many, many years in a row to find the route in the correct condition to send. And so it was like, maybe that's not the best pursuit for, like, you know, if I want to climb hard stuff, I'll do it on lower mountains or I'll do it at the crags. But climbing really hard stuff up high, um, it's unlikely you're going to get the conditions, but also it's like super dangerous. So maybe that's not a great thing to do. And then I was like, well, you know, a lot of these trade routes, like the classic routes, they are the classic routes because they're always in similar shape year to year, and they're all totally skiable. So that's where my focus shifted. And it was like, well, I want to try skiing these routes because I think I can, and it looks fun to me. So when I was thinking about going back to Everest and skiing, my dad was like, "Why do you want to go back to Everest again? You've been there a couple times. Why do you want to keep fucking with that mountain?" He's like, "You should go to K2," and I was like, "Oh man, I think you're right." And my father's an incredible dude, super supportive and everything, but to have your dad tell you or like suggest something hyper dangerous like that was a little like kind of alarming to me, and it stuck with me in my strategy for parenthood, protect their kids. And um so you're like, I mean, even with my kids, there are certain things like I'd like to suggest to them, but I know that there's a chance they could get hurt doing it. So I keep my mouth shut and I just let them figure it out. And if they ask me, then yeah, I take them there. I guide them through it. Um, but yeah, you know, when my father said that, my sights shifted to K2, and I was looking at pictures of it, and it's like, man, that's totally skiable. I could do that. And so that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was 32, I went to K2, and then again when I was 35, I went. And the conditions just like it just didn't line up, just because the weather on K2 is so horrible. So, well, it's not horrible. It's just typical mountain weather. And if you're looking for time in, uh, you're likely not going to find that on K2. So. Yeah, yeah, it's a totally different animal. And I mean, it's really, it's almost as high as Everest, and it's way steeper. But if you took the length of 2 football fields and stood it vertical, that's the difference between Everest and K2. Like it's really not that much different. But it's a lot more remote. It's difficult to get there, and the weather is brutal. So the climbing season on K2 is just to go there in the warmest summer months, because like the weather is kind of crappy all the time, and you might as well just be there during the warmest months. And by warmest months, it's just like it's still sub-zero all the time. Yeah, I brought skis. The goal was to, or the plan was to climb and ski Broad Peak, which is the 12th highest mountain, and that is right next to K2. So went there trying to acclimate and ski Broad Peak, and that was the plan. So we went up there, and then after that we were going to go to K2, and I was going to try to ski that. So on Broad Peak, there was, so I typically am the only skier in the group, and we had a last minute addition to the team in 2008, and it was this fella, Dan. And Dan had a fall. He wasn't even skiing, he was climbing up, but he wasn't using the fixed ropes. And he had this 1,500-foot fall. He took a wicked beating, and we rescued him. We got him back down to the glacier, back to base camp, and the Pakistani army came and flew him out the next day. So after this wicked, dramatic day, he was gone. The army flew him out. So it was almost like somebody on our team had just died and they were gone, but all his stuff is still there. It was super heady. And maybe like a week or two later, we made, me and my buddy Andy Selters, this photographer, we went up and made an attempt at the summit. I'm in. You're likely not going to find that on K2. So yeah, it's a totally different animal. And I mean, it's really, it's almost as high as Everest, and it's way steeper. But if you took the length of 2 football fields and stood it vertical, that's the difference between Everest and K2. Like it's really not that much different. But it's a lot more remote. It's difficult to get there, and the weather is brutal. So the climbing season on K2 is just to go there in the warmest summer months, because like the weather is kind of crappy all the time, and you might as well just be there during the warmest months. And by warmest months, it's just like it's still sub-zero all the time. Yeah, I brought skis. The goal was to, or the plan was to climb and ski Broad Peak, which is the 12th highest mountain, and that is right next to K2. So went there trying to acclimate and ski Broad Peak, and that was the plan. So we went up there, and then after that we were going to go to K2, and I was going to try to ski that. So on Broad Peak, there was, so I typically am the only skier in the group, and we had a last minute addition to the team in 2008, and it was this fella, Dan. And Dan had a fall. He wasn't even skiing, he was climbing up, but he wasn't using the fixed ropes. And he had this 1,500-foot fall. He took a wicked beating, and we rescued him. We got him back down to the glacier, back to base camp, and the Pakistani army came and flew him out the next day. So after this wicked, dramatic day, he was gone. The army flew him out. So it was almost like somebody on our team had just died and they were gone, but all his stuff is still there. It was super heady. And maybe like a week or two later, we made, me and my buddy Andy Selters, this photographer, we went up and made an attempt at the summit. And so the next day I packed up and took my first footsteps on K2 with a couple other guys, and we went up there on this rescue mission, fixing ropes to help these injured climbers down. And that was the summer of 2008, that K2 tragedy where 11 people died. So that was my first taste of K2. It was really heavy. Yeah. I mean, 11 people died. A bunch of the people were folks that we were hanging out with, that we would go and chill with as we walked up on rest days. We'd go up to K2 base camp and hang out with people. And then on rest days, they would come down to Broad Peak base camp and hang out with folks. So it was this really heady experience with all these people coming down, wicked frostbite and everything. Pakistani army making multiple trips a day with the helicopters flying injured people out. And after a couple days, K2 base camp was a total ghost town. Like there was nobody there. And the mountain had both the Chesin route and the Abruzzi had fixed ropes all the way up. People had abandoned their camps. So the tents, sleeping bags, food, fuel, oxygen up on the shoulder, like everything was still in place because everybody was just dying and bailing off the mountain as fast as they could get off with frostbite. So the mountain is like fully equipped. There's 2 routes that are fully, it was like a sport route. If K2 could be a sport route, fully equipped with, with draws and everything, like that's when it was. It had the tents, the food, fuel, like you could have charged this sucker. And we waited for 4 weeks in base camp, waiting for a 2-day window. We were like, we'll climb the first 2 days in shitty weather, and we just need 2 good days for the summit day and then to get back down a little ways off. And so we were looking for a 2-day window, which typically you're looking for like a 4 or 5 day window. And we waited 4 weeks in base camp and did not get a 2-week window or 2-day window. So we just sat there playing cards, drinking whiskey, and eating Nutella for 4 weeks, waiting for our chance, and it never happened. And we left, and that was the end of the 2008 season.
So Dave, I just want to know, like, how do you mentally prepare yourself for these adventures, or do you just like see an adventure and you just send it?
Yeah, I just see something I want to do and try to send it. It's just, I'm a off the couch kind of guy. So I see tremendous value in training and preparing your body, physically. But the jobs that I do are that. I mean, I'm out in the cold all the time, skiing around, patrolling, carrying heavy stuff uphill slowly when I'm mountain guiding. So my jobs are the best kind of training for big mountain climbing. So I don't spend much time in the gym. But now that I'm getting older, I certainly will. I see tremendous value in doing yoga as preparation for big mountain climbing. But it's really, as physical as this type of climbing is, it's 70% mental. So you just have to keep your mind calm and know you can do it. And so that's when I'm looking at something, and if it looks fun to me, then I know I can do it. If it looks terrifying to me, then, and I'm not sure I can do it, it's like, well, do I want to try that, or no, I'm good. And I'm just one of these dudes that, like, I like to have fun, and if it looks good to me and fun to me, then I'm game. But so everybody thinks of things differently, and what looks good and fun to some folks looks terrifying to others. So it's really just up to you to decide, does it look like a good adventure, fun adventure for you? And if it does, then you can do it, and you just got to believe in yourself. That's all.
I love it. All right, Ryan, how's it going?
Good, Grant. How are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for coming up here. Just give me 1 second, Ryan. Hey, everybody. If anyone else wants to raise their hand and come up here, please do. That first person kind of dropped off. But Ryan, feel free to ask your question.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for being here, Dave. I was curious to know about your return home journeys and how that affects you mentally from, walking over dead bodies, having to go do rescue missions on the mountain, and then coming home and having to be a dad and come back to reality. Like, what's your mental preparation for that as far as your normal different lifestyle, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it was always really difficult for me. I would come back from these trips and my head and my heart would still be in the mountains, and I would still be processing these really intense experiences that I just went through. And and during that time, I'm trying to integrate back into the real world. So there's a bit of this culture shock thing happening, but my life at the time was like that. So I do seasonal work. So there's a fair amount of insecurity and downtime in the shoulder seasons. But during the time I was going to K2, I was living in Minneapolis, or based out of Minneapolis, and my wife was doing her medical residency. And I would spend the summer or the winters skiing in northern India and Kashmir. So I would really only be in Minneapolis for a couple months at a time. So I didn't really have any like decent employment or anything like that. And nobody wanted to hire me because I was only going to be around for a couple months and then I was going to split again. And then once people found out what I was doing, they all thought I was going to die, and they definitely didn't want to hire me because they knew I like probably wasn't coming back. So it was just a really challenging period for me. So when I'd come back from these trips, I'd be looking for work. I wouldn't be mentally present because I was still processing the like the deaths of friends and just so many other things that it was supremely challenging. And my wife, now my ex, or my wife at the time, now my ex-partner, she was witness to all this. And that's one of the things that was really difficult on her. Not because, I mean, so many aspects of high altitude climbing are really difficult for the family and partners because it's super dangerous what you're doing. They think you might not come back. And then when you come back, there are these mixed emotions of, well, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're safe, but you're not present. You seem like you left your heart and in the Himalaya and you want to be back there. You are not productive at home because you're not mentally present. You're struggling to find work. You're struggling to integrate back into society. And it's a really challenging time for the climber and the family. So, and I haven't done any big expeditions since having kids. So I've been out of the game for a while, and I'm so stoked to get back into it. But yeah, like I don't know how it's going to be for my kids to feel like, oh my God, my dad's going to do this. Um, and then, like, I'm not sure it's really on my kids' radar that I could potentially die and never come back. And when is the right time to have those discussions with your kids and this is something that Matthias and I talk about all the time of, how do you let them know that you're going to do this stuff and it's stuff that you need to do, you want to do, but you're not putting your profession or your goals or desires above the value of your kids. How do you, if you're talking to your kids about you might not come back, but you love them, you'll always love them. I think that they're going to process it in a way, or like, well, if you think you're going to go and die, why are you going to do it? And it's not like that I think I'm going to die. I'm real, and I know there's a possibility of dying doing anything. But yeah, it's just one of those really heavy conversations to have with kids. I mean, it's a heavy conversation to have with adults. A lot of adults don't get it. And it's just one of those things where it's like, well, if you understand, no explanation is necessary. And if you don't understand, no explanation is possible. And like little kids, they don't have that life experience to know. So, yeah, just coming back is really difficult. And then talking about the possibilities before you're leaving is also really difficult. I don't know. The whole thing is just really difficult and it makes it sound really ridiculous.
Uh, Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's freaking heavy, Dave, and we've talked a lot about this many times. And but I don't know. Have you talked about potentially not coming back, or friends that have not come back with your kids?
Yeah, yeah, I have, but I also, I feel like they are changing, and what they hear and what they absorb and how they perceive things, process things is always changing with the amount of life experience they gain. So it's definitely a talk that I need to have with them again. And I feel like this is the kind of talk that needs to happen every time we're going out on a big adventure. And they need to know that um, we're doing this for our reasons. And it's not that we are choosing this over them, because kids need to grow up with parents. Like, they need that love in their life, they need that stability, and they need that encouragement. And if you're not there for them, then there is a possibility that they could perceive themselves to be not enough. And why wasn't I enough to keep my dad here? Why did he go and do this stuff when he knew that I needed him to raise me? Um, and it's super heavy, and that's something that I'm really struggling with now with the divorce. Is like, I'm not in my kids' everyday life anymore, and it kills me. It totally guts me, and I carry so much shame and guilt that I'm not there for them on the daily. And they're young enough that they don't have a phone. Like, I can't just pick up a phone and call them. And to call my former partner saying, like, please, can I FaceTime with the kids? It's really sticky, because she is in her own process of the divorce, and sometimes we just need some space from one another. So the whole thing is just hyper complicated.
Yeah, yeah, I understand, and I mean, to put some context for people who are listening to, a couple of years ago, I went to do a really dangerous feat in the Alps, and I wrote a letter for my child before leaving, and I put four people in there as a contact, in case I didn't come back, that someone could talk to, who could become mentors for him and help him understand my quest, aside from also my letter breaking it down. And Dave was one of these guys. And I think it's super important to have the dialogue. But I think on a selfish level, Dave, writing that letter really helped me accept the risk even more, to go back to
Right.
the mountains and do something that I might not come back from. But one of the points that so obviously, maybe write a letter for every one of your children individually, and
Right.
a letter they can understand as a child, but that will also help them, that they can also learn from as an adult. But the other thing too that I really made, an important point about in my letter to my son, in case I wouldn't come back from the mountains, is that I am not abandoning him. It's not like I chose to just leave and take off and just leave him behind, right? It's like, yes, I'm pursuing this existential journey. This My existential pillar is there, but there's also some reasons for that, obviously. But that every time that I leave, that he's more with me than ever. I always carry actually a picture of my son with me, and when he was a baby, I used to carry a pair of his baby socks with me as a reminder to come home safely. But obviously, I would not look at these when I would be on the mountain, because it's the time to be selfish and focus on what you're doing out of your own survival. And but yeah, I think Dave, you know this really really well, and I think yeah, it's more importantly, I think it's about having that open dialogue with your kid, because even if they your kids in your case, because even if they're young, it's kids can understand death. I think in the potential of dying, I think the importance is to teach them the ethos that is behind it. That it is not just a mindless act. It is it is a philosophical existential journey. and you can share that with your children, and they will understand. And that's how I did it. I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I know it did well for me. But at the same time, I also came back from my adventure as well too.
Right. Yeah, it's heavy, and it's not just, these conversations don't only need to happen with the kids. They've got to be with the partners and the family members as well. I think our focus is on the kids because we care so much about them and want to provide for them. And we don't want them to feel abandoned. However, a lot of our family members, they feel the same way, and they may not understand it, or they definitely don't understand it. And that's one thing that really pulled on me a lot and weighed me down back in the day when I was doing a lot of these trips, is like, how could something that brings me so much satisfaction and fulfillment terrify my family and stress them out so much? I mean, a couple of years ago when I was preparing to go back to Everest, I told my mother, I was like, I'm going to go back to Everest in the spring. And she immediately started hyperventilating. And it was like, fuck, man. Like, I feel bad that this thing that I really love just stresses the people I love the most out. It's a difficult thing to deal with.
It's part of the journey of a man. I remember when I went to the Matterhorn to ski base jump it. When I left um, the house of my parents in the Alps to go to the car with the camera guy and leave, and I had my parachute on my back, and said hi to my mom, and then my dad just stood there crying.
Yeah.
I was like, shit. So I just gave him a hug and walked away, and it's did it and then came back, and it's heavy, it's there's not necessarily an answer for that, but I think it's also not being numb to it that matters, also
Right.
feeling it all, and not just putting on the front of that mountain man that's gonna go climb no matter what, and he's and doesn't have feelings. It's like, fuck this. It's exactly the opposite. You
Right.
doing this because you have the honesty to feel it all. I think
Right.
it's beautiful quest. And if you look at it, legends in the Alps, for example, many men have gone through this before us, and when I say us, I'm not putting myself on the same level of what you've done, because I've never gone to 8,000 meters on Everest and K2, but when you look at legendary mountaineers like Patrick Valençon and that had families or that passed away, they didn't come home, but the other children understood their quest, which I think is what matters. The daughters of Patrick Valençon, one ended up being a mountain guide, and the other one, while also becoming a doctor. And his other daughter, because they lost their mother as well from a mountain accident, so they lost both parents in the mountains. But both kids, one became a professional mountain guide while being a doctor, and the other one is an engineer and an avid mountaineer as well. One of my friends I went to school with in the Alps, Michael Dubois, he's lost his father at 5 in the Alps, hang gliding, sorry. And Michael is one of the best guides in the Chamonix Valley, and he actually trains the high mountain units of the French military. And I think these are not coincidences. It is very hard on the children, for sure. They lose their father, but the gift that you're passing on to them is the power of an existential quest. And maybe
Right.
I'm being too French about this, but I think there's so much unspoken value about doing what you're doing, and that's another reason why I respect you tremendously, and why I love you as a friend, and why you're one of my closest friends.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is my path, and this feels very true and correct to me, but it doesn't feel clean. you know. I mean, it feels clean in some ways, but there are aspects of it that to me are not ideal. And I think that is just because there are parts of us where we are givers and we want to give to the people around us. We want to protect the people around us and make them happy and safe. And me pursuing certain things upsets people. And that's what I mean by it's not clean. But that's all part of the journey, the inner journey for us, is to process things, come to terms with them. You either make peace or you change it. And but we gotta be true to ourselves and do our thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, without wanting to, there's so much blame that he's putting on selfish behavior on mountaineers, but is it really selfish when you're doing everything you can to be there for your family while still pursuing your own journey? And I think it's a tricky balance. It's a tricky balance. But again, I really encourage you to write a letter for your children, because for me it was a liberating experience that really helped me. It gave me the feeling of doing it clean, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I could see that. There's definitely an aspect of tying up loose ends.
Yeah.
Or the perception of loose ends. Because
Yeah,
there
but
are
also,
no there are no loose ends. You're going there to do your thing, and we always plan for the worst,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
we're just trying to um, get things sorted out. It's logistics, get things sorted out so they're not a problem.
But I think it's more than just tying loose ends. I think it's also leaving something substantial behind and valuable, that you
Right.
might be gone, but your help, your support, physically is gone, but it's not fully gone because you left something behind that is helpful and valuable, And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, if you, I know you'll be, if I don't come back, you'll be one of the mentors of my son, and you can count on me to do the same for your kids too. We're in this together, brother.
Yeah, we are. And thank you for that. And I love you, dude.
I love you too, brother.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, thanks guys for being willing to have this kind of vulnerable conversation on here. I know I get a lot of value out of it, so thank you. Mark Sullivan came up here on stage. Mark, how's it going, man?
It's going well. I was a member of the Mount Southington ski team prior to becoming a snowboarder. So just so you know that. But I have two questions for you, a little bit unrelated. The first one I'll just float out there, and I'll follow up directly with the second question. So there's this statement out there. So I bring people to big mountains, to Alaska. I go to Alaska every spring to ski, and there's a saying that's like, the closer to death the closer to death you come, the more alive you feel. I'd like to hear your reaction to that. And then the follow-up question is, with these mountaineering objectives, they're so big and so long-term. I'd like to hear a story about like the hardest objective that you had to turn away from, and what that decision process was like to actually start going down the mountain and staying alive. And that's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And so the first question, the statement of the closer to death you are, the more you feel alive. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And typically we live in a very controlled, comfortable environment. And when you are moving towards death, you are usually not in a controlled or comfortable environment. But that sort of suffering and those external feelings, the weather, things like that, it makes a difference. And then there's the mental aspect of it, of being uncomfortable, the suffering. So I I agree with it. I'm trying to think of one of these things that that Iggy Pop said, and it was basically along the lines of he's a habitual edge seeker. So I forget what he said, but basically it's like he's looking for the edge, and he goes to the edge often because that's being on the edge is where he finds the thrill in life. And I think a lot of us feel the same way. It's really hard to know where that edge is sometimes, but the more often you hang out near the edge, you kind of figure it out for yourself. And then the second question of a really heavy moment where I had to choose when and how to turn around was on K2 in 2009. We got really high up, and that was the year that I skied from over 27,000 feet. But we spent 4.5 hours and made 40 meters progress. The snow was armpit deep, and we were up above the bottleneck, across the traverse and heading up onto the upper slopes, and the snow was armpit deep. And it was just this unconsolidated sugar on a really steep wall. And we had some of the world's best climbers at the time. We're all there swinging leads, breaking trail, just wallowing, swimming up this slope. And 40 meters in 40 hours. So we're basically standing still at over 27,000 feet. And it got to be, I forget what time it was, but it was like 3 p.m. And it's like, shit, man. I know people summit this mountain late all the time. Well, not all the time, because very few people summit, but it's not uncommon for K2 summits to happen at like 5 or 6 in the evening or 8 in the evening. But that just didn't feel right. And me and my buddy George, we had said that, if it's like 4 p.m, we're going down. I don't want to summit this mountain in the dark, and I don't want to be coming down in the dark. And especially because this was 2009. So the year before, 11 people had died up there. So we were determined not to become a statistic like that, or not to become some tragic story. So yeah, I was up there kind of just pushing my way up there, trying to break trail. And I looked down, and I must have been sucking really hard, because I turned around and George was just like giving me this motion of like that sweeping hand motion across his neck, like, no, we're out of here. This is done. And I was like, well, I guess that's it. And but it was difficult because we were very close. And I thought that at that time I probably wasn't going to come back. I didn't know. And it was like, all right, that's it. We're not summiting. And it's like, this is the second summer in a row and not summiting. And nobody summited that year in 2009. And so that was in my head, but also I had skis on my back. So I knew that I had to keep my game face on. And at that point, whatever point, that high point, I was turning around, that I was going to do my transition and click into ski bindings and then ski down some gnarly stuff. So I had to keep my head together just to focus on the task at hand. And I mean, really, I went to K2 to ski. I mean, summits are great and everything. I like the climbing. I pretty much only climb big mountains to get to be able to ski down them. If I'm climbing for money, guiding and stuff, that's different. But if I'm climbing on my own, I'm going there to ski, and I can't ski down if I don't climb up it. So, but that's kind of my mindset. But it was really difficult. I skied down. We actually stayed at high camp that night, hoping to try again the next day. And I froze my ass off that night. I didn't bring a sleeping bag. I just slept in my down suit, which was just covered in ice from a day of wallowing in the deep snow. So that night and morning were really difficult. My feet were frozen, and I decided not to go up the next day. There was me and two buddies that stayed on the shoulder that night, hoping to go up the next day. And we woke up, we were alone, and we're like, no way. We just had a terrible night. We're freaking exhausted. There's no oxygen or anything like that. And it would be foolish to head back up. So we decided to bail, and that's when I just skied from the shoulder down to base camp.
Heavy story, Dave. Heavy story. Wow.
Yeah.
Sharing.
Super heavy, bro. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I have to leave. So, Dave, you're doing an awesome job. I wish I could hear the rest of you talk, but you guys enjoy. Dave has got a lot of amazing stories like this. So, thanks for having me tonight. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Later, bro.
Yes.
See ya.
Cool. So Dave, I got a couple things I'm thinking in my head here, so let me just reset the room. By the way, so if you are just tuning in, I think most people have been here since the beginning. We're talking with Dave Watson. He is a mountain guide, a ski patroller, a mountaineer, a ski mountaineer, kind of all around mountain dude. We've getting pretty philosophical here. We kind of covered a lot of things around fatherhood and responsibility, a lot of different topics. I am going to open it back up for questions at the end, but I just want to kind of ask Dave a couple of questions and dive in on a couple of things before we get back to that. So if you do want to ask him a question, please stick around. There will be that opportunity. So, Dave, I know we've been kind of getting into the heavy stuff, but I like this, and you're a metal dude, so you probably like the heavy stuff too. The piece on death, like this thing that's kind of hitting you in the face, and I get all the stuff around your kids, but like death itself, like are you frightened of that? Like, is that something that plays in your mind when you're on these mountains, or is that something that you're just like, I don't know, have some other thoughts on?
No, I'm not afraid of death at all. I think I think there's this really amazing thing on the other side, and I welcome it. I'm not seeking it, but if it happens, of course I'm down for it. Not like you really have a choice or anything. Death is one of those things that is, I think it's a wonderful experience, the greatest adventure we know in this realm, but it's most difficult for the people that are left behind. So my reservations or my feelings about death are very complicated, because I feel like it would be great, but I also know it would be incredibly painful for the people left here, my kids, my family, friends. So it leaves me with very mixed emotions. I was in an avalanche in 2018 and was obviously rescued. But in that time where I was buried, I had this experience and these sort of visions, and it left me feeling very, very solid in my belief that there is this really amazing thing on the other side. So I felt like it was like there's that whole like tunnel of light kind of thing, and I felt like I was a little ball of energy, like this little glowing ball and just kind of floating through space with all these other little glowing balls of these souls that had passed at similar timing to me. And we're all going in the same direction towards this thing. And we're all plugged in into like the infinite wisdom of the universe, where suddenly everything that in my life that I had ever questioned or wondered about was making sense. It was like this massive download of everything in the universe. So everything was just like, you were just getting flooded with all of this information, and everything was peaceful. It was like, oh, you're home, like you're back. And um and I didn't arrive at any destination. Like I was still moving as this little ball of light, and all of this information is just like flowing into me, and it was really like wonderful, and it was just like going home. But then suddenly it was like the plug got pulled, and all of this information that I had just downloaded was just like hemorrhaging out of me. And then I remember, then at that moment, my buddy is in my face screaming at me, and I'm starting to come around, and I'm like spitting blood and teeth out of my mouth. And then I'm back in this realm. I'm back on this side of things. And, and as I'm coming back around and spitting all this like ice and teeth and shit out of my mouth, all this information that I had just got is just like flowing out. And it's like when you wake up from a dream and you are trying to recall your dream, and you try to fixate on a part of the dream and try to like really lock into it and remember it, and try to enough so you could verbalize it. And as you're doing that, it just kind of vaporizes. You ever have that feeling of waking up and trying to remember your dream? And it was the same. So I was trying to just lock on to, like, why, that question of like, why did this happen when I was a kid? And I had the answer, and I was trying to remember the answer, and it was just kind of vaporizing. And then I'd jump onto, like, try to latch onto this other piece of information and remember it, and it would just vaporize. And so the first words I said to my buddy Nick, who rescued me, was like, well, I have so much to say, and I can't remember any of it. It was all just fading away as I fully just settled back into this side. So, and that it was a very long rescue, and I took a wicked beating, and I spent the night in the hospital. Like, my kids were there. They saw me laying in the hospital. They're actually like laying in the hospital bed with me while the doctors are giving me the rundown of what's going on. So my kids have seen it before, and they know that these things that we do, they could lead to death. And they know that, everybody dies. And, we've had a dog that died. Like, they've been exposed to it, and they've had people explain that, there's beauty beyond it. Death is not something to be feared. So yeah, I mean, the whole death thing is like, there's something really wonderful and beautiful on the other side. I only got just a little glimpse, so I don't know where it leads, but I feel like it's even more real than this side of it. But I feel like we're on this side, and we're not these little balls of light. We're like these big bags of meat with complex emotions, and we do ridiculous shit, and we drive cars, and we work these jobs, and like, it's just very different. And I think like this is a classroom, like human life, as we know it here, living on earth, is this classroom, and we're here to process things. We're here to learn. And when we die, our souls go somewhere else, and I don't know where it is, but it's just as real as this. So I'm not afraid of death. I think it's there's something really amazing out there, and super valuable. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I'm not afraid of it.
It seems like maybe sometimes when people hear you say that, do you think they confuse that statement with, like, I'm not afraid of death with, like, I don't care if I die? Like, maybe those are two different statements.
Yeah, totally. I think they're very different statements, but I mean, what I've learned, I mean, in the past year, going through this divorce and everything, it's all about communication. Life is all about, like, all of our relationships are all about communication. And if you feel like you're being a good communicator, you're not. And if you feel like you are making a very intense effort to be an over communicator, you're probably just communicating. And whatever you say to somebody is, like, how they interpret it, you don't have control of that. And no matter how clear and surgical you feel like you're being with your words, there is always room for misinterpretation, because everybody hears things and processes things as they know and as their life experiences tell them. So, if I make a statement that I'm not afraid of dying, there's absolutely room to interpret that as, this dude's crazy, he's reckless, he doesn't value life. There's so many different ways that could be perceived, but they don't know where I'm coming from, and I don't know where they're coming from. So that's why we just have to try to over communicate to show, like, I could say, yeah, I'm not afraid of death, and this is why, and I had this experience and I saw this, and, like, this is my truth. And when I say that or explain it or share that story, then people are like, oh, all right, now you've given it some context. So but yeah, whatever we say could easily be misinterpreted, no matter how clear we think we're being.
Right. I definitely understand that. Yeah, it's one of the things I actually like about this platform is the sort of, it's just audio, so it's you have to really listen intently. I want to follow up though on something you kind of said. You're saying that this life is like a classroom, and that things are here maybe to teach us something for whatever it is that happens after. I was doing some research on you before our chat, and I know that you had a good friend, Laura Green, and basically the story that I could sort of understand was you two so you're on ski patrol together, and you made a film with REI, and it's if anyone wants to look it up on the internet, if you looked up REI Presents and Dave Watson, you would find this kind of 10-minute film. And then from what I know is the day you were done filming that, the next day Laura passed away. Is that what, so yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess, I'd love to hear the story, and then, like, maybe what do you think were the lesson was there for you? Like, was that something they're meant to teach you something?
Yeah, everything is a lesson for us. It's just whether or not we choose to see it as a lesson. Yeah, Laura was just one of these incredibly rad people. She's just a very diverse skill set, revered in so many different communities, and the ski community, the wind sport community, the whitewater community, the bodywork healing community, the dance community. She operated at the highest level in all of those things. And I knew her through ski patrol, and she was one of the avalanche forecasters on Mount Hood. She worked with the Northwest Avalanche Center as a forecaster, sending in observations. She also did wind forecasts under a fake name. Like, she was just a super rad woman. And And REI was looking to feature women in different realms of like different states of water. So Laura was the featured woman in this frozen water snow thing. And I believe there were other films for based on women that had made careers in, whitewater, things like that. But anyway, we made this film together, and it was filmed by these local guys in the Gorge, Story Gorge. Sean O'Connor is really good. I thought it was really well done. It ended up having a focus on me in the avalanche and how my family was dealing with it and things like that, and her as my teammate, and some of the work that she does on the mountain using explosives to cause avalanches, things like that. And Laura and I also worked teaching avalanche courses for this company up on Mount Hood called Mountain Savvy. And so Sean came out and filmed some of the stuff we're doing at ski patrol. He filmed us teaching avalanche courses, filmed us out ski touring up on Mount Hood. It was a really nice thing. It was a great piece. And the day after she finished her last voiceover, she went out windsurfing. It was December 6th, and it was blowing like 60 miles an hour on the Columbia. Huge waves. I mean, like huge waves blowing hard in the winter. Like nobody else was out there. She's out there alone, just going out and ripping, because that's the kind of chick she is. She's just super badass. And she went out there solo, was riding all day, and didn't come home at night. And then her husband went down and found her car parked there with the dogs in it, and he was like, "Oh fuck!" And her body was found the next day. But yeah, and so this movie turned into like basically this legacy piece of like and it's super cool that we have this to see this part of Laura. And yeah, she's just such an amazing person. And nobody, like a lot of people didn't really know how diverse, like how many different things she was involved in until this memorial, where it was this awesome party in a huge place, standing room only. It was like hundreds of people, and people from the whitewater world were like, "Oh, I didn't know she was such a badass skier." And people from the dance community were like, "Whoa, I didn't know she was doing all this stuff," kind of stuff. And these people that you thought you knew Laura, and it was like, wow, there's some of these folks that spoke at the memorial were like, "Oh, I'm here because Laura, I heard about Laura from my father, and my father was in this senior center for a long time, and Laura would go there and give free massages. And my dad always talked about Laura and how she was so cool and all this kind of stuff. And I never met her, but I just wanted to come and say, just thank the people around her." And it was like, wow, she was doing all this shit and just making a really big impact in people's lives in so many different ways, and like nobody really knew about it. And it just kind of speaks to how how an amazing person, how much of an amazing person she was. So
yeah. And I mean, the fact that you guys had filmed together and then she kind of died right there, did you walk away with any larger lesson from that?
Yeah, well, she had told her husband like a couple days before that. It was like she made a comment of, "I feel like I've had a really wonderful life, and it feels complete, and like I feel full." And when he Sorry, obviously it's like I'm getting choked up here. It's super emotional for me. But to hear him say that was like, it just brought a sense of peace to the whole episode, like the whole situation. To hear her verbalize something like that, that she was basically ready to die, and then it happened, was like, it was just, obviously super intense, but it was validating in the fact that, like, we are here to learn these lessons. And eventually we get to the point where we've graduated. And, once you graduate, when some people graduate, it's like they're out. They just peace out, and that's it. And it happens in different ways, different times. But again, it's just like, it's not for us to understand. We'll understand it all later. Once we die and we get that massive download of everything in the universe, it'll all make sense. But there's so much here in this realm that doesn't make sense to us, and it's just not our time to understand. And we just have to accept that it's not our place right now. But in due time, it'll all make sense.
So, I'm going to ask you one more thing, and then we'll go to some questions, maybe a couple questions, and then some parting thoughts. Does that sound like a good flow for the rest of this, Dave?
Oh yeah, that's great. However you want to roll it.
All right, man. So, my friends, actually, let me just reset the room real quick. We are here with Dave Watson. Dave's an all-around mountain man, summited Everest, skied off of K2. He's a mountaineer, a mountain guide, a ski patroller, avalanche educator, but also all-around life philosopher. We've gotten really deep in this conversation. So Dave, my friends who are here would probably tell you that I am a very spiritual person. And I've always believed that you kind of just run into the right people when you're kind of meant to. Right. And I'm going to admit that I cheated a little bit before our conversation. I did listen to the only other podcast I could find that you had done maybe a couple of months ago. And in it, the interviewer asked you, where's the next place you want to go? Or where's a place you want to go that you've never been? And you said Bhutan.
Yeah.
So no, hold on, because this is a little crazy. Because when you said that, I was like, no fucking way. So, Dave, the long story short here is, 5 years ago, I put together one of the first ski mountaineering expeditions ever to Bhutan. Oh. And hold on, oh no, here's what happened. It never happened. Because about, less than 2 months before we were supposed to leave, our mountain guides backed out on us. And I couldn't find anybody else. So when I listen to this interview and I hear you talking about that, I'm like, well, clearly I wasn't meant to go then, and I was meant to meet Dave Watson so we could go to Bhutan together.
Yes, I like that.
Next
so
adventure.
I actually know a guy. So I know a Bhutanese guy, and he set the whole thing up. We were going to stay at this base camp for a mountain called Chomolhari. It's a different Chomolhari than the famous one. And we were gonna basically ski tour up to like maybe 17 or 18,000 feet. So, you don't need to say yes right now, man. But
yes.
Okay. Yes. That's so rad. So I also want to say, like, if anyone's listening and is like, yo, let's go ski tour with Dave in Bhutan, shoot me a DM and Instagram. Let's make this thing actually happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
We had like 5. Yeah, it was going to be so rad, and it was just such a bummer it didn't happen. So yeah, man. All right, we'll make this happen, Dave.
Yeah.
So once again, if you want to go to Bhutan with Dave and me, shoot me a DM and Instagram. We'll figure out all the details.
Yes, let's do it.
Fuck yeah, dude. All right, so let's open it up to some more questions. I know some folks have been here for a while, but I'm going to reopen the hand raising right now. So if anyone wants to come up here and ask Dave, take maybe 2 or 3 more questions, feel free to raise your hand.
So I have a question. This might sound tacky, but adventuring, it's all about adventuring. And I was going to ask what's your next adventure, but Grant asked, and that's already done. But what about your adventures with your kids? What are your small ones with them, or how do you get them involved?
Yeah, that's great, because I feel this guilt not being around them every day now, because it was just such a huge part of my life. For the past 8 years, and now that I'm not living in that house anymore, things are just very different. But in that time, we took a lot of road trips. We've done a lot of stuff. I mean, all 3 of my kids started. My daughter just got a cast off her leg. She boot top tib fib, broke her leg skiing. So, that shows you how badass she is. She's there for it. And my kids are all rock climbers. They ride bikes. Like they're awesome, curious, healthy, wild little kids. And it's really kind of up to them of what they want to do and where they want to go, because I would like to empower them to dream of things and make it happen. And as parents, we can facilitate a lot. So it's really kind of up to them to have these dreams and do the research, figure out where they want to go and why they want to go there and what they want to do. And we can all put it together. And I think those types of skills will help them throughout their lives. I mean, this is just problem solving and setting goals and achieving goals. And I'd like to make that happen for them. In the immediate future, I am in beginning of April, I'll be heading to Nepal to work on Mount Everest. And then end of May, I'll be headed back here to the States. June 9, I head up to Alaska to work on Denali. And then I'll be back July 3. And at that point, I think my kids are going to be living on Kauai. My former partner is moving there with the kids. So at that point, I'll be heading to Kauai to hang out with the kids and just have a lot of beach time, and we'll probably do some surfing and some river kayaking, like flatwater kayaking, and a lot of hiking and stuff. So, that's where that's at. And then next winter, I'll be scooping them up off of the island and taking them skiing. So there's a lot I want to do with my kids. It just kind of depends on what their interests are. If they're really into whatever, if they're really into baseball, I'll be taking them to baseball games. If they are into skiing, they'll have plenty of skiing in their lives. If they want to go climb El Cap as a 12-year-old or something, then I'll take them up El Cap. It's kind of up to them what they want to do. We'll be doing our family trips, our road trips, going rock climbing and skiing different places, going surfing and stuff. But yeah, as far as the big grand adventures for the kids, I'm going to let them call the shots on those.
So it sounds like they're getting it ingrained in them, so they're learning all about it, and that's great. I see that there are a lot of amazing people in our audience of all levels, so don't be shy to come up. Ksenia, I see that you climbed Kilimanjaro. Anyone else wants to come up and ask any questions?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys? Thank you so much for being here and for doing this talk. I'm somewhat new to Clubhouse, and it's taken a second to like find some rooms that really intrigue me, and this has been one of them. So I appreciate the conversation. And I had a question for Dave. You know, it's so interesting to hear about all these different adventures and expeditions that you've been on, and obviously they require a lot of like physical training, but I was curious in regards to like mental training, like how do you mentally prepare for some of these expeditions you go on, and do you think it's something that like you really have to train for mentally, or are you just like the type of person that isn't super fearful of going on some of these things? Because that's something that I've personally found that I struggle with in like my my outdoor adventuring, is like just moving past the fear of like trying something new or doing something harder. And so I was just curious if there was, you know, specific things you do to mentally prepare.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think this is really the root of all attempting or endeavoring to adventure or accepting challenge, is just knowing that you can do it, or maybe not knowing you could do it, but knowing that you can try and fail and you're going to be all right. It's okay to fail, and failure is the greatest teacher. So, you know, as far as the mental preparation, it's like, really, what is your biggest fear in it? Is it that you're gonna fail? Like, you know, why? Just trying to break it down from sort of like the back end. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, the best is like you go there, you have a great time, and you learn a lot. And the worst is you're gonna go and potentially die. But you know, like,
Yeah.
what, you know, but like, why would you die? It kind of, it depends on the adventure, like the activity that you're doing. But if you know that you're not going to die, you know that you're going to be safe, then really, like, it should be easier, or to find some peace and some calm with it. I think just knowing that you can do it, or that you're willing to try it, and it's okay if you fail, then that's where it's at. You know, you don't put any judgment on it. And I don't know, does that make any sense?
Totally. Yeah. No, I love that. And like, I guess what I was hearing was more focusing on the positive outcome instead of like what could potentially go wrong, and just like focusing on all the good that can come out of whatever that thing is, instead of, you know, going down the rabbit hole of potential disastrous things that can
Right.
take place.
Totally. And there's a lot of value in going down that rabbit hole. You know, you don't want to be going into things blind. You don't want to be purposefully ignoring potential outcomes. You want to explore every outcome, because that makes you more prepared. But you can really psych yourself out if you are just playing this what if game. And
Absolutely.
like what are the likely outcomes? Because, you know, a meteor hitting the wall when you're you know, up climbing, like, that's not going to happen. You know, it's more of like, you know, for the expeditions and stuff, it's all right, you know, there's the chance of like rock fall and avalanches. You know, that's, you know, that it's kind of out of our control, as long as we choose to climb at, you know, a good time. not in the heat of the day where rocks are falling down, and not after big snowfall where avalanches can happen. The other outcomes are like the personality conflicts within the group, things like that. I mean, you focus on the most likely things, and then just kind of stay out of the weeds. Like don't play that what if game and psych yourself out. If you are thinking of a particular adventure and it sounds fun to you, it sounds enjoyable, then it will be. Just don't psych yourself out. Just know that you're going to go there and have a great time.
Thank you. I think that's just what I needed to hear. I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, so nice to meet you. My name's Hannah Rohani Wilson. Thanks so much for having this space. I've been really enjoying conversation. Dave, I just want to thank you so much for like your vulnerability. Like I was hearing you choke up and it really kind of just sat in my chest. Mountaineering is such a dangerous sport, as we know. And I think I had a 2-part question, if that's all right. If not,
yeah,
one will totally be fine. So, it's really interesting when you look at Mount Everest, K2, and like these other great mountains that they have this problem. And, it's so interesting, like, bodies remain up there. And so what do you think about like some people remain to wish, like they, will tell people if I pass away that they want to stay or not to remove their body. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that one. Like that, it's one thing if someone makes that wish, right? But if it's an unfortunate thing where they didn't plan for that, like what you do in that case. And
right.
then number 2, I'm Iranian American. So I was lucky enough to go to Iran, and I saw Mount Damavand, which is the second biggest volcano in Asia. It's the highest peak in the Middle East. And I was like, I got to climb this thing, right? But like, I feel like mountaineering is this bigger than life thing where you need a whole lot of expertise, training, and that, involves a lot of money and stuff like that. So what do you recommend as someone who like eventually wants to do that? Like what the courses are here that you can take without having the cost of the, for some people, this is a professional career, but for other people, they have to save up their whole lives for one shot at something. Like what can you recommend to do here, for example, in the States, to prepare for an over trip like that?
Yeah, both great questions. So first one about the bodies, I think that everybody, once you get to be an adult and have any sort of assets or anything like that, you really need to make a will. So that way, if you die, your family isn't just guessing what they think you would want through a filter of what they want and how in their belief system. So everybody should have a will. And a lot of the folks that go up there and die, they may choose to stay. Like if I died up there, I'd want to just stay up there. I don't want to endanger anybody trying to bring down a 200-pound block of ice that is just really cumbersome, and would just be really difficult and dangerous for people to go up and recover the body. So I would just choose to stay up there. And if I was on the route, I would want them just like push my body off the route, just so that people don't have to step over me. And I think a lot of people, they feel the same, where when they don't communicate what they want and how they feel, that's when the families step in and say, I really need that body to come home, for their own closure. And again, that's one of those conversations that needs to be have with your family before you're going and doing these things, of like, hey, these are my wishes, and I want you to think long and hard about how you would feel if I went and died. Like me as your son, if I went and died, are you going to want my body taken off that mountain? And if so, why? And where do you want it? You want it buried somewhere close by near your home or whatever, family plot or something? have them analyze that. And again, it's just like over communication with these really difficult topics. And if you're over communicating, you're just barely getting the job done. So those conversations have to be sorted out before you go and do this kind of stuff. So it's not just a huge guessing game and this really emotional game of tug of war, push and pull, of and incredibly expensive. I mean, taking a body off of Everest and flying it back to the States has got to be like at least, I would say, like $500,000. And, you know, and for what? So now you got this body that was frozen and you take it down and now it's like this rotting corpse in a down suit that's all busted up. And so you're going to throw it in a box and put it in the ground, or you're going to light it on fire. So yeah, I don't know, the whole death body, like what to do with the corpse. That's a whole different conversation that goes so many different ways depending on beliefs and religion and culture. It's just so many things. But yeah, I think that if people want to remain up there, that's fine. And that's their wish. And as a climber, seeing these bodies up there, it really makes you really like sink into yourself and makes us evaluate like what we're doing and why we're doing it. And really recognize the weight of the situation and the environment you're in, how unforgiving it can be. And those visuals and those experiences of being around dead people, they're extremely valuable and very, very heavy. And they bring a lot of insight. So yeah, I think it's, but you know, not everybody feels the way I do. So there's that. And Mount Damavan is like, I've wanted to go there. I've met a lot of Iranian climbers in the Himalaya, and they're all awesome people. It sounds like such a awesome mountain to go and climb, especially if you have this connection to it, this like cultural connection and this draw to it. Then you need to make it happen. Go and do it. I know in Iran, there are a lot of climbing clubs. It's much more accessible to get into climbing and high altitude mountaineering in Iran than it is here in the US, where everything in the US is just like money. Like if you don't have the money, you don't get to play. This is very much a pay to play society, and it makes it very limiting, and it turns certain sports into this very exclusive thing, like skiing, like mountain climbing. So what I would recommend is find a local climbing club. Like I don't know where you're located, but in Seattle, there's the Mountaineers. In Portland, there's the Mazamas. There are climbing mountaineering clubs in different places, and those can be places or opportunities. They may provide opportunities for very low cost to free instruction. And that could certainly get you on the path. Another thing is like join the local climbing gym and start climbing, indoor rock climbing. Learn how to use the ropes, belaying, because that will be a really good jump off for just getting comfortable with the ropes and climbing. And then you'll be able to just learn different skills from different people. You'll meet different climbers, and then you'll be climbing outdoors. You will just be making friends and potentially mentor. There are a lot of really great online resources. YouTube University, you can just Like, I don't know what would come up if you just searched like how to climb a mountain, how to climb a mountain instructional video. I don't know what would come up, but there's probably a whole bunch of stuff. I think there are a lot of different ways to do it, but it requires a little bit of creativity, and it's a little more, I guess, pinpointed depending on where you live. Does that make sense?
No, definitely does. And I definitely want to encourage you to go to Iran and ski. It's a hidden gem. For example, I took a taxi and everything, my entire cost for the day was $50 to go to, a premier ski resort in Iran. The equipment isn't as good, but it's amazing. And yeah, I definitely have checked out all the Iranian groups, and it's not that expensive. But I think that's what scares me is like they have great regulations, but it's just an unknown. I even being half Iranian, don't speak Farsi, and a lot of people speak English there, but it's different when you like travel to a country to climb.
Yeah, totally. Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
You're going to do it, and you're going to have a great time.
All right, Jake, how's it going over there?
Hey, good. Thanks for letting me come on and discuss a little, or talk a little bit and ask a few questions. Also new to the clubhouse and also a Pacific Northwesterner like Dave. Dave, I had just a short 2-part question for you. Kind of switching gears a bit from what Hannah brought up. I'm wondering, what's been your biggest sufferfest in the lower 48? Whether it's been a gnarly ski descent on Mount Hood or a crazy alpine climb that kind of caught you off guard and got you back to the car way later than you thought. And also, if you can open up on your music genre of choice when you're out in the mountains or when you're doing like a dawn patrol up in the mountain. Also, FYI, I reached out to a good friend of mine who's a coworker of yours, and he kind of steered me to kind of ask these questions. So
nice. So biggest sufferfest, I don't know. I feel like everything is a lesson. And, so in that viewpoint, nothing takes this sort of, or feels negative. I think it's it's one of these things where if you have this unintended outcome and it's really uncomfortable, it's viewed as this negative experience. Whereas I think those experiences are the greatest teachers. And I'd say, I don't know, it seems like there's a bunch of them. Some ski tours just getting like really cold. Certainly so many days ice climbing where you're just frozen and you're just kind of like not having that much fun because your feet and your hands are completely numb. But you get through it and you dial in your system a little bit better. You make changes, you learn from it. I don't have any real experiences of like tremendous suffering and pain in the lower 48, which I guess is good. I try to minimize those types of experiences and be well prepared. One thing I am wearing now that I didn't back in the day is heated socks. I really just want to encourage everybody to look into the heated sock thing. It is quite amazing, and it sounds kind of soft and cushy, but I think that in the next decade, it is going to be the way to go. It's just so nice to have comfortable feet. Cold feet are just brutal, but yeah, I feel, I guess, fortunate in my lack of lower 48 sufferfests, I guess. And then music, I just really like rock and roll. My father was a rocker, and he was always just blasting the Stones and Thin Lizzy and the Allman Brothers. So that's what I grew up on, and it feels like home to me when I hear like hard rock and heavy metal from the 70s. That is just what feels like home. Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. I just really like that hard rock and roll and heavy metal. And that's what I listen to almost all the time. And a lot of these metal bands, they have really kind of soft melodic albums that are really nice for all the different moods. So I feel like I can listen to a lot of rock and roll and metal and still have it sort of be appropriate and not this like really heavy, screaming, wild, heavy music in a moment that is calling for quiet and peace. But I really love music, and I really love live music, and I miss it so tremendously.
We're there with you. Dave, you know you're over 30 when you need some heated socks.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man, heated socks are the way.
Absolutely. All right, Ksenia, how's it going over there?
Hey, guys. Hello. Nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for this amazing talk. I think I've learned so much, and I feel incredible and happy that I can relate to so many thoughts expressed here. So, Dave, thank you for this deep conversation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Also thank you. Yeah, and also thank you for bringing up the YouTube University. I've been learning a lot about mountaineering from YouTube University myself, but it's also a great opportunity to ask a person who has a big experience about the mountains. So my question is about Denali. As I've heard you saying that you plan to go to Denali this year, and it's one of your adventures, and you've been there a lot. And I understand that you also go there as a mountain guide, right? Yeah. It's one of my biggest dreams now to go and climb Denali. So could you please describe your view of this mountain, like in few words, from the viewpoint of a mountain guide? What do you think about this mountain, and what kind of person you think can actually attempt to climb it? Thank you.
I think Denali is an incredibly beautiful mountain. It's really tall, it's really cold, and gets a lot of snow. And it's really hard work to climb it because there is a lot of shoveling. There's a lot of carrying very heavy packs and sleds. You need so much gear to climb it. But there are new strategies around. Typically when people go to a high-altitude mountain, they need to stay there for at least a month to let their bodies adjust to the altitude. They go up, set up a camp, come back down, rest, go back up, stay at that camp, reorganize their gear, head up to establish a higher camp, come back down. There's a lot of this yo-yoing up and down the mountain, trying to move food and fuel and equipment higher up on the mountain while you let your body adjust to the altitude. And now there is a new strategy, this hypoxic training, where you can sleep at home in your bed with this tent over your bed. And this tent is hooked up to a machine that scrubs oxygen out of the air in a fairly precise way. So you can set this, dial in the settings on this machine to simulate the air at a higher altitude. So you can acclimate at home, essentially, and you sleep in this tent. You can sleep at 9,000 feet one night, and then the next night you turn it up to 10,000 feet, and you just keep doing that. And if you have a terrible night's sleep, you just keep the altitude at the same that night. But if you sleep well, then you turn it up another 1,000 feet. So you can acclimate at home, and these machines go up to about 20,000 feet. So you could train at home with this machine, sleeping at, up to 6,000 meters, like 20,000 feet, and go to a mountain like Denali and spend a lot less time there and have a much quicker expedition, because you're essentially ready to go to the summit as soon as you get there. So this hypoxic training has really changed and will definitely change the landscape of high altitude climbing. All of our climbers for Everest this year are training this way. So that way, when we show up on the mountain, we're already acclimated, we're strong, we're ready to go. And it greatly minimizes the amount of time we need to be there and exposed to the cold and the dangers of the mountain. So that is one strategy for Denali. And what I'd recommend is if you want to go and climb Denali, I would go and climb Mount Rainier and get dialed in on Mount Rainier, especially in the very early season. Like if you're climbing Rainier in April or May, when it's really cold, that would be really good training for Alaska and for Denali. But Denali is really physical. There's just so much snow that there's a lot of carrying heavy packs, dragging sleds, shoveling, waiting out storms in the tents. It's a lot. So you just have to be really dialed in your campcraft and also dialed in your glacier travel movement, working and movement as a rope team. That answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, answers. And thank you for this insight on hypoxic training. I live in a big city and there are not so many mountains outside. So this kind of training can actually help a lot if going to the bigger mountains. Thank you so much, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, we're going to go to our last question. Just very quickly before we do, the 5 folks on stage, do we have your permission to record you? Can you just unmute yourselves and say yes if we do?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, now our last person, John. How's it going?
Going great. How are you guys?
All right, thanks, man.
All right.
Thanks so much for doing this, Dave. This has been really insightful. Just had a question. So I'm a city dweller and don't get up to the mountains nearly as much as I'd like to. So are there any non-obvious things that you do when you're either, on the road or unable to make it into the mountains, beyond going to the climbing gym and maybe watching some YouTube videos or watching TV about the outdoors? Are there any non-obvious things that you do to sort of stay in the backcountry mentality?
I kind of, because my work is training folks, doing rescue and training folks in avalanche rescue and stuff, I am often in this like hyper cerebral place where everything is analyzed. I'm constantly reevaluating what's going on, the changing conditions. It's just I like to be prepared and self-sufficient. So I live in my brain, and it's gotten me into trouble because I am now endeavoring to live more in my heart. So just being in my brain all the time, it is just like, how could I be better? What could I be doing? How can I minimize risk? What are the choices? I need to make the right decisions because life and death depends on it. Other people's life and death depends on it. So just kind of living that backcountry mentality and that mountain mentality is, in some ways it serves and in some ways it doesn't. And I'm trying to balance it a little more with my heart. But one of the things that, I suggest to people that live in more urban environments that want to train for the mountains is, certainly going to the climbing gym, but there is really nothing in the mountains or nothing like climbing in the mountains and specifically descending in the mountains. Where I see a lot of people having trouble is on the way down. I mean, they're like the idea of climbing mountains is like, yeah, I'm going to get on this Stairmaster in the gym with a heavy pack and my boots, and I'm just going to start grinding away, and I'm going to walk for 3 hours up a bazillion steps. And that's cool and everything, but like that's only part of climbing. And really, people reach this point, whether it's the summit or not, where they have to turn around and they have to come down and they're totally exhausted. And nobody ever trains walking downstairs or downhill in the gym or anything like that. Everybody's focused on the up. So one thing I would recommend is go into the tallest building around, ride the elevator up, and walk the stairwell down, and ride the elevator up and walk the stairwell down, and just keep on doing that, and do it with a heavy pack, do it with your boots, because that motion of walking downhill is really what kills people. And that's where the wheels fall off. I see it all the time in the guided trips. People are always training for the way up and they don't train for the way down. And it makes it really difficult. And that trouble on descent is what leaves a really bad taste in people's mouth, because they feel like when they struggle so much near the end, they feel like they're a failure. And it's not that they're a failure, it's just that they overlooked this very key part of mountaineering. Is like, coming down is like, you're gonna do it, and you should train coming down, your descent, as equally as the ascent. People have hip and knee problems coming down. It's like, well, I don't want to train that because it hurts my knee. And it's like, well, what do you think is going to happen on the mountain? Like, you're not just going to float down the mountain. Nobody's going to pick you up in a helicopter and get you down. So, that is one of these little sort of like crystal nuggets of wisdom I want to throw out there. Is like, train for the down just as much as you train for the up, because it's 50-50. What you go up, you got to come down. And if you live in an urban area, find a giant building or like parking garage or something like that, and you can put on a heavy pack, walk the stairs going up and walk the stairs going down. If you just want to train the up one day, you can climb up the stairs, ride the elevator down, climb up the stairs, ride the elevator down, and just keep doing that. And then train the down, where you ride the elevator up and take the stairs down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it definitely mirrors some of my own experience in the mountains. So it's helpful to have that refresher. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Rad. Well, thanks, Dave. I've actually never heard that piece of advice before for training the down. That's a little gem right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I just want to just say thank you for being here. Do you have any just maybe last parting words you want to share with the audience?
Well, yeah, just thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for your interest in what I have to say, and I wish you all the best of luck with all your endeavors, whether they're in the mountains or not. Just be safe, be true to yourself, and really everything, it comes down to communication. Just share where you're at with your partners, and the experience will go a lot smoother.
Rad. Words of wisdom from Mr. Dave Watson. Dave, just thank you again for being here, man. What you said today was really touching. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. Hey, thanks everyone for being here. Just to give you a heads up, on Monday night, we are going to be interviewing Sasha DeJulian, the pro climber. Who I actually just learned recently is actually recovering from a pretty significant injury. So please come for that conversation. I think she'll have some really enlightening things to say. But besides that, everyone have a great night.